Today I want to talk about this, the only other time I've run a marathon. First, I think I need to show you something really quick. So in our house, when you come in, we have all these family photos. This is one that I have of that marathon. Baltimore Marathon 2010. I ran it. My dad ran it. My mom ran the half marathon. And these are my dad's friends. So I wanted to tell this story because as I've been preparing for the marathon and posting a lot of videos about my preparations, there's been a lot of comments. Thank you for writing comments. But there's been a lot of comments about, is this my first marathon? I've been getting that question like on Strava and Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube as well. And so I have run one other marathon before. It was the Baltimore Marathon in 2010. Now back at that time, I wasn't really, I only had just started to take videos. I had been kind of a compulsive photographer since like the early 2000s and even a couple of years before that, so around like the turn of the century. But video is only something that I'd really gotten into, unfortunately, like kind of starting later that month. So like around Halloween and November, around my birthday, in 2010. So I only have photos from the event, and I definitely wasn't like vlogging. I wasn't trying to run with a camera at the time. I think my camera at the time was a Canon ELPH. The really little ones, so it was really tiny. I really loved that camera. We've got a couple iterations of it. Anyway, but so I'll try to post some photos that I have from that time as I'm talking about the race experience, because I don't have any video to show you, unfortunately. But the Baltimore Marathon, the whole idea for it, I mean, I don't live in Baltimore. My parents don't live in Baltimore. We're not from there. But my dad had been running with a friend, and he'd never been much of a runner before then. I ran some cross country in high school, and I also ran track, and then I also ran in college for a couple years. Although I didn't really run, I was a pole vaulter, so we tried to run as little as possible. But I wasn't much of a runner then. I wasn't really very active at all, and my dad and his friend had picked the Baltimore Marathon to run for a couple of reasons. One being that it's like a run, they call it a running festival, and so there are multiple distances of races that are run kind of at the same time along the same course. Now everyone doesn't start all in the same corrals, but it gave us the unique opportunity for my mom to run a half marathon and for us to run a marathon at the same time on the same day. And so what was really one of the more memorable things for me about that race was that there was one moment where we had caught up to my mom, because the way that the courses were staggered and things like that, we ended up catching up to her. And for a brief moment, the three of us ran three wide across the marathon route for maybe about a couple of blocks. And so that's the only time that's ever happened, and I don't think it'll ever happen again, but it's something that I'll never forget, something that was really special to me. But leading up to that, I had basically gone from couch to marathon in the span of like Memorial Day to late October, which is when this race is. And so it's not something that I would recommend. It didn't really work out for me. By the time I got to the finish line, my left knee was really bothering me. It felt like it was either like a stress fracture or like the knee just felt real shaky, and it was almost as if it was grinding a little bit in the joint area. So I guess more like this. Whatever it was probably an overuse injury because I didn't have any mileage base to speak of. I was underprepared for the marathon. I hadn't run anything on my own longer than probably 17 or 18 miles, and I was hurt. So we started the marathon, and everything was, I wouldn't say fine, but around mile 8 or mile 9 is when things started to go really wrong. I had a bathroom injury. I had a bathroom emergency, and also the injury was starting to really act up at that point. And so I split off from the group. My dad and his friend, the three of us were running together. So I split off from the group. I told them to go on ahead, don't wait for me. And then rather than just kind of picking up from where I left off, I tried to catch up with the two of them, which meant that I had to run much faster than I had really been accustomed to running, and much faster than I should have been running. For the level of kind of fitness that I was and the level of training that I had, and especially considering the condition that my leg was in. But I did finally ultimately catch up with them by about mile 16 or so. That's when I really just died. I didn't really have much left. I did a lot of running and walking. I told my dad and his friend to go on ahead without me. And then I did catch up with them again somewhere around mile like 23. And then the end of that course runs around like a big, huge, not that big, but it seemed never ending at the time, a little like pond or like man-made, not lake, but big pond. And that I just found just to be utterly demoralizing, to spend all this energy to go around and then end up right back in kind of like the same spot, and then still have another like 3 miles left to run. But one of the things that I will also remember after that marathon is that as I was coming down the chute in the final stretch, I had like nothing left, and I look up and I just see a row of my own face. And so we were there, my wife was there, my sister was there with her husband, and in Baltimore, my wife's cousin, who she's very close with, in fact, those two were living together when I first met my wife. Her cousin and her husband were living in Baltimore at the time, and what her husband did was he found a picture of mine on Facebook that he downloaded and then photoshopped out just my head and printed out several copies of my face and put them on sticks. So everyone that was there cheering for us, and there was like 6 or 7 people, they all had my face on a stick, and they were all, so it was like me yelling at me to finish the race and cheering myself on, and that was just a hilarious moment, and that's another really special moment from that race that I won't forget. After the race, I felt miserable. I swore that I would never run another marathon again, because you know what? I had done it. I had run a marathon. I finished. I can cross that off the list. Now, in all of this, my dad had ended up passing me. I told him to go on because I just couldn't keep up with him anymore. And he ended up finishing at 4 hours and 32 minutes and 23 seconds. I ended up finishing more than 2 minutes later, 4 hours, 34 minutes and like 29 seconds. So our goal going into it was to run it at about 4 hours for the marathon, which is a little bit more than 9 minutes per mile. So we were way off, both of us, but we were all just happy to finish. I was 30 years old at the time, and my dad was 61 at the time, so he was exactly twice my age, and yet he managed to beat me at the only marathon that either of us has ever run. It was a horrible race. I did a horrible job, and I only barely finished, but it is one of the best races that I've ever been in.
Oh, what's going on.